times in his rhymes, cause his memories. We running through New York, so you never leave. Strap my lungs, then we puffin' through with that right. We're giving them some stories, they come back like manic this, manic that, why you crawling to me? The hell we gonna...
Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be going over the N63 reliability video. So a lot of people who have this engine are mostly in the US, and we also get some people here. Now this engine wasn't a big seller here because it's obviously a V8, and a lot of people don't go for that engine based on the fact because of the fuel costs. A lot of people look at it because they're coming up cheap, because the amount of issues they're having, because a lot of people are scared of them, because of blown engines. So we're going to go over the reliability video, and we're going to speak about everything that fails on that engine. So the first one on this engine, guys, is excessive oil consumption. Now the N63, just like the N62s, the previous model, all have their engine design in a V-shaped way. Now what that ends up doing is the stems are sitting on the valley pan, which is the hottest part of the engine internally. So then what ends up happening is the valve stem seals end up running dry from the heat, and they're causing the oil to leak there past the valve stem seals, which has been noticed on all the V8 engines. So what ends up happening, your valve stem seals end up getting shot because it's in a V. So obviously the stem's going up and down, they're causing a lot of heat and friction. So it ends up damaging your valve stem seals. So that's one of the main reasons why these cars end up with excessive oil consumption, and why the engines end up blowing, because a lot of people don't check their oil because they buy this car not expecting it to end up using a lot of oil, but it ends up being the case because of that reason, because the valve stem seals are actually shot. So then what ends up happening is the car runs dry and ends up destroying itself because of oil loss failure, because people haven't topped it up. And obviously it's a big engine, so it takes a long time to use the oil, so people don't realize it, and then by the time they have realized it on the highway, the oil is completely drained out the engine. So that's one of the common reasons of the N63 why it ends up blowing up, and why a lot of you are finding these engines cheap, because of that reason, because of excessive oil consumption. BMW have never rectified it. They always end up doing it when they do a V8 engine like that in a V shape, and they always end up putting the stems on the hottest part of the engine, so they end up failing completely. So another one on the N63 that likes to fail a lot is the injectors. Now you guys know I speak about the injectors a lot in my reliability videos, and this is because BMW have carried on, keep using these bloody injectors. Now these injectors do fail, and what ends up happening, it'll cause you a lot of black smoke out your exhaust. It can cause you poor acceleration. It can also cause a rough idle as well. Now these injectors, what ends up happening is they're high pressured injectors because it's a turbocharged engine, so it therefore uses direct injection injectors. They get clogged up with a lot of carbon, and they end up stop working. Now this is a common problem on the N63, and it's something a lot of people don't realize. The N63 is notorious for the injectors failing, and like I say, a lot of people have still got these cars under CPO warranty or under warranty in the UK here, but the majority of the time is the injectors are very costly. They're about £600 each in the dealers, and when they go out, people can't afford to replace them. So then what ends up happening is people just drive it. Because it's a V8, you wouldn't even notice when one injector fails. I do recommend to take the ISTA program. Again, I do provide that, and I do sell that if any of you guys want that, and that's something that I do recommend to have for this car, because it's got a huge amount of electronics. These are found on the 7 Series, the 5 Series, the X5s. It's on quite a lot of the cars. So I do recommend that you guys do take the ISTA program, because these cars are crucial for this to obviously understand which is actually failing. It can make you run rings around the car not knowing what part to actually replace and what parts failed. The injectors do fail in it, just like the M53, just like the M43. All the M54, all of them, the injectors do fail. They use high pressure injectors, they use a high pressure fuel pump, and they are notorious for failure. It's just the way it is on the N63. Nobody can do anything about it. BMW still haven't rectified it, and that's the case of it, and they are still expensive. So this is why you see them coming out with very cheap, because the parts are very expensive for this car. So the next one on this, guys, is the timing chain in the N63. So as you guys know, BMW found that on the N63's the timing chain was stretching and just failing prematurely, which nobody understand. It then ended up coming linked to the guide, and because the chain, because it was apparently too much power from the turbos, overcharging engine was causing the chain to stretch, and then BMW tried to blame it on the people giving a long service life on the oil change and not changing it when recommended. But then I blame BMW for keep stating that it's 10,000 to 12,000 service interval. The reason they've done that is truly because they wanted to sell more cars to make it look like you don't have to service it as regularly as you did years ago. That's because the engines are running hotter, which because they're running hotter, they actually burn off the oil. And you know, BMW state all these cars are meant to use oil, so then they're using oil, so you're retopping it up with fresh oil, so then you don't need an oil change. That's not a very good way of doing business, not a very good way of selling a car. The N63 did have timing chain failure. They did rectify it in, I believe, 2012. They rectified the timing chain, but people were still saying that it did fail. You had people even here in the UK dropping their cars off at BMW for this problem, for this big issue that was having, because obviously it was a massive expensive job and nobody could really afford that. I think BMW wanted $7,000, about £4,000 here just to replace the timing chains on that car, and it just wasn't feasible. A lot of people didn't want to have to do that. A lot of them were done under warranty, a lot of them were done under recall as well. There was a lot of recalls out for this N63 as well, so if you guys ain't aware of that, go and check on the recall site, because there was a lot of recalls for the N63 engine regarding the timing chain and regarding the electrics on that car. So the next one on the N63, as I spoke to you about previously in the beginning of this video, is the valve stem seals. Now, as many of you guys don't realize, the valve stem seals are notorious for going out on the N63 as well. Now, on the N63, the valve stem seals are just like any kind of V8. You'll see a load of blue smoke. You'll end up with oil loss, and you'll also end up with a loss of power as well from the oil getting into the combustion chamber. So if that happens, you will realize it, and I do recommend that you do get these replaced. And like I say, I do have a product up for the valve stem seal repair, which is the Forte valve stem seal repair. You guys who probably already have seen it, but if you guys are new to this channel and you haven't seen it, I do have the video up. That stuff really does work. It's something used here in the BMW dealers. It's also used here by a lot of independent garages. Most garages have it and stock it. You have to be certified to use it, but obviously I have been able to ship it to the US because I'm certified. I get it all in, so I'm able to get it, and it's not an issue. I do ship it to the US as well if any of you guys are needing that for your car. I've only had great results and great feedback from people with that product who have purchased it, and it's been working flawlessly for all their 750i's, 650i's with no issues. So if you are needing it, make sure to just drop me a message and I can sort that out for you. So the next one on the N63, guys, and this again was recalled by BMW, and a lot of you with an N63 already know this, is about the battery drainage on the N63. So as many of you guys probably don't realize, the battery drainage come from BMW's smart systems. What they were doing is to leave the electrics on to cool down the turbos after, so they can keep the engine running until it's ready to turn off. What that was doing in turn is actually draining the battery and draining all the electrics, so then when you'd come out to your car would end up you wouldn't be able to start it because the battery had gone flat. So what it was end up doing is costing people more money in the long term for a new battery constantly, just for it to keep cooling down the turbos, because that's all it was designed for, is to actually cool down the turbos. That's what the whole idea of the battery drainage problem was, and that's why BMW rectified it, because the way the turbo sit is in the V shape again, so they had to cool them down because they had produced too much heat. Same as like I said to you in the beginning with the valve stem seals produced in the V shape, producing too much heat and ended up knackering the stem seals. This is the same for the turbos as well. So BMW, the way they come up with it is to leave it in efficient dynamics, and in that way it could leave the engine on, cool down the turbos before it ends up shutting down, so you didn't destroy the turbos. Because BMW always found out that the majority of case of turbo failures because people weren't letting the oil cool down and get around them and cool the turbo down before shutting off the engine, which again is something you're meant to do, is to not just shut off the engine when you've got an engine with a turbo. You're meant to leave it running, let the turbo cool down before the car shuts down. A lot of people years ago used to put remote starts on their car, and it would only cut off once the turbo had cooled down. But this is the N63. BMW, again, very smart at their German engineering, but not that smart. They could have played it smarter and let the person, you know, leave it on for 1-2 minutes, let it cool down the turbo. But instead, they were causing it where the battery was draining, leaving all the electronics on to cool down the turbos. The next one on these guys is the turbos. Now, as many of you guys realize, there's 2 turbos on this engine, and the turbos on this are notorious for failure. They do fail, and they are running about £1,000 each. The most common cause of turbo failure is because of that last reason we spoke about, was the battery drainage, them trying to leave it to cool down. But what was happening is people, when BMW done the update and stopped that happening, they end up destroying the turbos because people weren't letting them cool down. So that's a high failure rate for the turbos as it is as well on the N63. Again, the wastegates on them end up making a load of noise. It was never been rectified by Garrett as of yet, but they still make a lot of noise. They haven't come up with any kind of design to rectify that as it stands at the moment, but I'm sure they will later on in life. It's a big problem on this engine, and like I said to you guys, you will find a lot of these N63 cars all over Facebook, all over Craigslist, all over Gumtree for sale, because a lot of people want to get rid of them because the cost exceeds the amount that car's going to need. Like I said, a lot of people still have them on a CPO and under warranty here in the UK because of that reason, because that's the best way to own these cars. Like I say, BMW are not building the cars they used to many years ago. A lot of people are still sticking to BMW thinking that their cars are still solid as they were years ago. No, that's not the case. BMW have literally gone downhill, and the N63 proved where BMW has actually gone to. They've gone really badly downhill, and I do recommend to avoid this engine like the plague. It's got a very bad score as well for its reliability, and I do recommend to stay away from it. Out of a 5, it only scored a 2, which is absolutely terrible for a BM, and that just shows you it's the kind of car that nobody really wants to own. Again, on top of that, you've also got the ignition coils that like to fail, obviously your spark plugs, and whatever else likes to fail like a normal car does. Probably the valve covers like to leak as well on that, which I know a lot of people have been moaning about on them. So you therefore have all these problems that do you really want to spend out for, as well as them expensive parts. Turbos and the injectors, and a lot of these parts are still running massive amounts of money. The same with the timing chain. The timing chain you probably would, it's going to cost you a big amount of money just to get it rectified. And if you was having to get the valve stem seals done as well, which is the cause of excessive oil consumption, which then leads to engine failure from people not topping up the oil and not realizing that the valve stem seals actually shot. So it's pushing out all the oil, and then your engine runs dry, which then it just ends up destroying the engine anyway. That's why you see a lot of them blowing engines. But I hope this has cleared a lot of things up for you guys with the N63 engine. If it has helped you, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't as well. Like I said, we'll be doing a lot more videos on the N63 because I believe it's something that a lot of people need. And if you have just found me, as I said, please subscribe. This is BMW Dr. Dean here. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please go and check out all my other videos as well regarding the reliability of other vehicles. Hopefully you can find another one if you are in the market looking for the N63. Hopefully I can persuade you if it's something a lot more reliable. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and goodbye.